Our content is presented by BetOnline, which is your number one source for the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup playoffs this season. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. Use promo code BELIEVE. That is BLEAV for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online. The game starts here.
So we were asked on Twitter about, guessing the starting lineup or what we think the starting lineup would be for a certain team. And it was Missouri that was asked about. So we're going to do this, predict the starting lineup. And we're going to go with Missouri this week. And remember, we always say, it's way different than it used to be. Like, your starting lineup is not necessarily... it's weird, right? It used to be, if you're not a starter, you're not any good. Like that, that used to be the thought many years ago. It's like, all right, if he's not top 5, he's not very good. Missouri, as we said, we're pretty impressed with the depth on this Missouri roster. Oh, yeah. And we'll talk more about them, where we kind of have them placed in the SEC pecking order. But I think if we start to build the starting lineup for Missouri, if we make our predictions for this, and I know my guys, Sam Snelling, and Matthew Harris are probably going to be listening to this, and when I get one of these wrong, they're going to be like, Blake, there's no way this guy's starting, or come on, Blake, this guy has to be starting. That's okay. They're the Missouri experts. We're just trying to piece together the roster. Max, I'm going to give you my first one here, and I feel pretty confident about this. Mark Mitchell is going to be in the starting lineup for the Missouri Tigers in 24-25.
Wow. Hot
bold
take
prediction.
There.
Should I have saved that for my one bold prediction at the end?
Well, I agree. I also have Mitchell in. Are we just going to go one for one?
Well, we'll kind of just maybe have some fun and discuss. I think there's another one that feels like a lock to me, and we'll see if that's where you go next.
I think there are 2 locks, and then the rest I think you can kind of have some argument. I got Mark Mitchell. I think he played the 3 his first year at Duke because Derek Lively and Flip were taken up to 4 and 5. But then once Lively left and it was just him and Flip, he played more of the 4. So it's positionless basketball. I don't really know if you want to slot him in at the 4 or 3, but Mark Mitchell. And then the other lock I've got is my man TP, Tony Perkins.
Yep. That's where I was going to go. I was going to say, I think those are the 2 locks for sure. Because we talked about Perkins in the video we did on him. I don't know how long ago that was now, but you're talking about a guy who started every game he played in the past 2 seasons at Iowa. Played 30 minutes a game or more, basically. So I think he has to be a lock to be in the starting lineup. Now is where things get interesting, because we mentioned kind of the depth on this Missouri roster. And, this is where I start to look at this, Max, and I'm looking around thinking, okay, look at all the pieces that are on this roster. Yeah. Jacob Cruz, Tamar Bates. I just keep going through this. I'm like, Aiden Shaw's there. Warrick's there. You've obviously got the talented freshman. Where would you go next if you were going to say this is the 3rd confident pick? Is it Jacob Cruz?
No, I was actually going to say my 3rd most confident is the big man, Peyton Marshall. I think you bring in Trent Burns is a really tall prospect, 7'3", about 200 pounds. I think he's going to need a little bit of time to develop. And then Josh Gray, the horse, I assume he's going to kind of have that same physicality pop off the bench role. Not a lot of people are talking about Peyton Marshall at 7 foot, 300 pounds, who has a 3-point shot also. I think it's pretty cut and dry. You slide Peyton Marshall there into the 5.
Caleb Grill, he's returning from the wrist injury.
Mm-hmm.
Is that...
Well...
Is that a lock? Maybe not a lock, but he would start, right, if he's good to go?
It would be... So now, basically, if we have... Would you agree on Peyton Marshall or no? Would you not have Peyton Marshall?
Well, I guess if it's... Here's I think the point you make. If it's not Peyton Marshall, who would it be? Josh Gray? Although I don't...
Gray, probably.
But, I feel like Gray's probably going to play a similar role like he played at South Carolina.
That's what I'm predicting as well.
So
if we've got Tony Perkins, we've got Mark Mitchell, we've got Peyton Marshall, that leaves 5 guys for 2 spots. You've got Caleb Grill, Marques Warrick, Annor Boateng, the 4-star freshman coming in, Jacob Cruz, and Tamar Bates. You've got 5 guys to rotate through maybe that 2-guard wing spot.
I was trying to find a way. Could you put Mark Mitchell at the 5? I don't know, though. I feel like that's probably not.
I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Especially when you've got 3 7-footers.
Right.
And, yeah, so it's probably not going to happen. He seems locked in at the 4. Yeah, I would think that's probably not.
Well, I was going to say, the thing that you have to also take into consideration is, like, spacing and who can shoot. And because Mark Mitchell's not much of a shot. Peyton Marshall or Josh Gray's. Peyton Marshall, I've seen flashes from him. I'm not sure he's much of a knockdown shooter. Tony Perkins only made 23 threes last year. His 3-point game is there, but it's not his go-to at all. So when you're looking at these guys left over, Cruz, Bates, Warrick, Boateng, Grill, I think you got to prioritize some shooting. And so I was real torn between Tamar Bates and Jacob Cruz, but I think I'm going to lean Cruz just for like the shooting and the spacing. He's also 6'8". Now you're going to have 6'8" Cruz, 6'8" Mitchell, 7 foot at the center. A lot of length, a lot of size.
It's like Bates pretty much just played the 3 last year, right? Like they didn't really use him in the 2 spot.
Right.
And so you could get creative there if you wanted to put Bates and Cruz together. So you could do a Perkins, Bates, Cruz, Mitchell, Marshall.
Yep.
I wouldn't hate that at all. But this is harder than I thought it would be. And I know that, again, this is going to encourage some debate, I'm sure, about how confident people are about certain spots. But I'm with you. I think really the only I am 100% confident on is 1 and 4, and that's Perkins and Mitchell. And then I think you could have one of the freshmen break out, whether it's Boateng. I mean, like I was looking at Josh Gray's numbers we talked about. I mean, he started 15 games in 23 at South Carolina, but he's only started 3 other games elsewhere in his other 3 seasons. Only played 10 minutes a game last year. 17 minutes is kind of the highest of the 4 years. And he's a little older, but I think he'll play the complementary role. And really, if you do that, I mean, Marshall feels like the best person to plug in there. Like we said, if Caleb Grill is good to go, I think he's in there. And I feel pretty confident about that. Cruz, I think, unless you're like, you want to use Jacob Cruz and like that 6th man, just high energy, pure scoring off the bench, you put Bates in there, you'd be a little bit smaller. So
I was looking at Tamar Bates here, and if you go to his season before last when he was at Indiana still, the Jalen Hood, Schifino, Trace Jackson Davis, Miller Kopp team, Tamar Bates played the majority of his minutes right behind Trey Galloway at the 2. Played a little bit behind Miller Kopp at the 3, but he was more a 2 guard at Indiana. And then you look at Caleb Grill. Caleb Grill played a ton of basketball before he got to Missouri. Played a ton in his season at UNLV, and then played a lot his final 2 years at Iowa State. Was a huge piece in that Gabe Kalsher Iowa State team. And then he's always struggled with injuries, though, and now he's coming off that wrist. So what I think I'm going to do, I think I'm going to lock in my starting lineup. I think I'm going to go Tony Perkins, Tamar Bates, Jacob Cruz, Mark Mitchell, and Peyton Marshall. I think that's what I'm going to lock in as my starting 5. But I could easily see Marques Warrick, Caleb Grill, Boateng, any of those guys getting up there into like those high 6-man minutes where it's like they're basically a starter.
Here's a question. Could you do Perkins, Grill, Bates, Cruz, Mitchell? That would require moving Mitchell to the 5, but I'm intrigued by that lineup.
That's a small ball lineup. That's a nice small. You still have 2 guys 6'8".
Now the only thing you could say is like, well, you got all 3 of your 7-footers on the bench. Now, maybe that's not what you're looking for. But
I think a lot of it depends on how consistent and reliable is Peyton Marshall.
Yeah. All right. I think I like your lineup too. I think that's the one. I mean, because again, I think this is harder than I thought it would be. I came to this thinking, you know what, we'll be able to piece this together pretty easily. But it's a tough, and the reason it's tough is one of the strengths of Missouri. Like we said, I think you could look right now, Missouri feels like one of the deepest teams in the SEC on paper, and it's just because, and I know people are gonna. I get it. Like, yes, I've been high on Missouri since Dennis Gates got there. I know what happened last season, well aware. But I think you see the depth that's on this roster. They got a lot of options, and they got a lot of, interchangeable parts here. And we've seen Dennis Gates. You can kind of look at the rosters they played over the past couple of seasons. Mm-hmm. There's more room for error. That's kind of the way we put it, right? And so they've got more depth to work with. I think I like your roster too. But I will say, like, I think the only I could see a lot of different combinations on night
Marques
one.
Warrick is there too. That guy has gotten his accolade list is you read a novel for Marques Warrick accolades.
Hey, remember too, you saw that I'm sure news this past week. Missouri's opening game, the 24-25 season, Memphis. So
I'll see
whoever
you
the starting lineup is, it's a big game on night one against Memphis. So, all right, I like that. We'll go with that for Missouri for now, subject to change before we get to the season.